Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Program. Next up on the top stories. Algeria denies setting up secret mercenary units in the Sahel, calling the claims false and aimed at tarnishing its reputation. Coming up next, Morocco is criticized over forced normalization, repression, and a helicopter drug smuggling scandal. Also in our news, Sudan's Rapid Support Forces attack a UN building in Kordofan, and ICC opens war crimes probe as the humanitarian crisis worsens. And later on, Gaza sees rising deaths from the cold wave amid ceasefire violations and flooding of displaced people. And the UN warns of record settlement activity in the West Bank. All this and more shortly. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us tonight. First up in our news, Algeria's defense ministry has issued a forceful statement dismissing such a fabricated scenario, calling it false reports. These reports claim Algeria created mercenary units for secret operations in the Sahel region. The ministry says promoting these narratives is a desperate attempt to damage the reputation of the Algerian army and to tarnish Algeria's regional and international image. It labels the story a complete fabrication.
In a blatant fabrication and an outright lie, and in yet another desperate attempt to damage the reputation of the People's National Army and tarnish Algeria's pristine image at both the regional and international levels, certain media outlets and websites known for their bias and bearing nothing of journalism but the name have resorted to promoting failed, poorly constructed and fabricated narratives and scenarios drawn from their own imagination and that of their patrons. These claims contain false and baseless information alleging that Algeria is creating mercenary units operating in the Sahel region to carry out covert operations.
The Algerian Ministry of Defense also stated that misleading news and unfounded accusations are being promoted by paid websites. These sites, it asserts, market a malicious agenda, serving entities hostile to Algeria and harboring deep hatred toward the nation.
The Ministry of National Defense categorically denies this misleading news and the unfounded accusations promoted by these paid websites which peddle malicious agendas serving entities hostile to our country and driven by deep-seated animosity toward it. These desperate attempts aim to undermine national stability, discredit state institutions and manipulate public opinion, an audience that has become fully aware of the falsity of such claims and that no reasonable person would be deceived by this nonsense.
The Algerian Ministry of Defense reaffirms the Army's full commitment to Algeria's established foreign policies and principles. These are based on good neighborliness, respect for state sovereignty, and non-interference in internal affairs of other countries. The ministry reiterated Algeria's continued efforts to restore stability in the Sahel region exclusively through peaceful solutions. It also restated its absolute rejection of the use of force or the logic of weapons.
Algeria, as an integral part of the Sahel sharing the same destiny and interests, cannot under any circumstances be a party to destabilizing the region. On the contrary, our country consistently seeks to contribute to the economic and social development of the region's populations in keeping with the principle of solidarity and in loyalty to the distinguished historical and humanitarian ties that bind it to the peoples of the Sahel.
The Algerian Ministry of Defense said Algeria cannot under any circumstance be part of efforts to destabilize the Sahel, stressing that the region is integral to Algeria and bound by shared destiny and interests.
The Ministry of National Defense emphasizes that the People's National Army, as the successor to the National Liberation Army, performs its duties fully in accordance with the Constitution and the laws of the Algerian Republic. It acts in complete alignment with Algeria's established policies and principles, including good neighborliness, respect for the sovereignty of other states, non-interference in their internal affairs, and a commitment to dialogue and negotiation in times of crisis.
The Algerian Ministry of Defense said the slander campaigns will not undermine Algeria's central role in the region, reaffirming its position as an active force for peace and stability.
Algeria, which consistently advocates at international and regional forums for global peace and security, especially in the Sahel, and continually calls for adherence at international law, has made and continues to make tireless diplomatic efforts to restore stability in the Sahel through peaceful solutions and the outright rejection of the logic of arms.
To a different story but still Algeria related, the United Nations ranks the country as Africa's third most developed nation this year in its Human Development Index. According to UN data, the ranking reflects Algeria's investments in education and health alongside efforts to diversify the economy, including modernized curricula and a stronger focus on technical, vocational, and digital skills. More details with Islam Said now.
Algeria is steadily climbing the development ladder, now ranking third in Africa on the Human Development Index, according to the American research group World Population Review. This rise reflects a clear shift in national priorities, with heavy investment in education and healthcare, the two pillars of long-term, sustainable growth. This year alone, Algeria allocated nearly $12 billion to education, modernizing curricula and placing a stronger emphasis on technical training, vocational education, and digital skills. Healthcare has also seen a major boost, with around $7.6 billion directed toward upgrading hospitals, improving service quality, and expanding universal health coverage, a long-term bet on human capital. Backed by ambitious fiscal policies and a broader strategy to diversify the economy, Algeria is strengthening its position among Africa's leading economies. In the continental rankings, Algeria placed behind Seychelles and Mauritius, while Tunisia came fourth, highlighting a changing African development map, one increasingly shaped by human capital and sustainability, not just raw economic output.
Moving on to another topic now, Moroccan anti-normalization groups have accused the Makhzen regime of using the country to justify Zionist crimes against Palestinians. At a Friday protest in Rabat, the Moroccan Action Group for Palestine called for an immediate end to normalization, denouncing the regime's forced policies and demanding a clear condemnation of the Zionist entity's actions in Gaza.
As the anniversary of the normalization agreement draws near, we are confronted with an undeniable truth. The decision to normalize relations was never widely supported. It was an unhistorical choice imposed upon a people who did not consent.
Human rights groups have filed a complaint with the UN, accusing Moroccan authorities of killing Yassine Chebli, a prisoner of conscience. They condemned the torture he endured before being shot in Ben Gurion in October 2022, due process violations, and the targeting of his family, calling for the case to be recognized as torture under international law. And in another development, Spanish police have dismantled a drug trafficking network moving Moroccan cannabis to Spain by helicopter. The civil guard said the helicopters carried 500 to 900 kilograms per flight, storing the drugs in rural farms and warehouses in southern Spain for distribution across Europe. Raids in Malaga, Almeria, and Murcia seized one helicopter, 657 kilograms of cannabis, 5 weapons, cash, and vehicles. In another development in Africa, at least 6 people were killed in an RSF drone strike on a UN compound in Kadugli, South Kordofan, South Sudan. The Sudanese government condemned the attack, calling it organized terrorism and a violation of international law. Authorities urge the UN and international community to protect humanitarian missions and hold the perpetrators accountable. Similarly, airstrikes by the Rapid Support Forces struck the eastern outskirts of El Obeid in central Sudan on Saturday, leaving a dozen casualties. Local media, citing military sources, report an RSF drone hit a square near a police station in the city's Taiba neighborhood. The attack killed at least 3 people and wounded 9 others, some critically. And in The Hague, the ICC held a meeting between Deputy Prosecutor Nezha Shamim and Sudanese Attorney General Intisar Ahmed Abdullah. The discussion focused on Sudan and cooperation on ongoing Darfur investigations, with the ICC confirming it has opened probes into possible war crimes. Meanwhile, demonstrations erupted across Sudan in support of the army and against foreign interference and RSF violations. Protests took place in Omdurman, Port Sudan, Atbara, and cities in Al Jazeera, El Kadarif, and Kassala states, with participants chanting in support of the army's fight against the RSF. In the meantime, the UN World Food Programme warned it will cut food rations in Sudan next month due to funding shortages, as the country is facing the world's worst food crisis, affecting 20 million people, including 6 million at risk of famine. The Sudanese Ministry of Health reported 256 newborns and 109 pregnant women have died in El Kadarif since the war began, with over 1 million pregnant women lacking primary care and thousands suffering acute malnutrition. Moving on to another story elsewhere in Africa, the humanitarian situation in South Kivu, DRC, is worsening amid renewed violence days after a peace agreement with Rwanda. Residents and health officials fear that tensions could spark a regional crisis with serious consequences. Karim Asfawi has the full story.
Fighting has resumed in eastern Congo after the M23 movement seized Uvira, a key border town linking Congo and Burundi in South Kivu. This marks the movement's most significant offensive since March 2025, raising fears that an already fragile humanitarian situation could spiral further out of control.
Violence inevitably leads to massive population displacement, creating a most worrying humanitarian situation.
La situation humanitaire dans la zone d'Uvira.
The humanitarian situation in the Uvira area remains worrying. It is characterized by massive population displacement driven by the intensification of armed violence in recent days, but also the disruption of essential services.
Among the victims is a woman who survived a bomb strike on her home, an attack that left her injured and claimed the life of her child.
I was at home, everything was calm. Suddenly a bomb hit the house while I was carrying my child on my back. A piece of shrapnel struck me and I fell. At first I thought I was the only one hurt, but then I realized my child had been hit too and died instantly.
The latest M23 offensive comes just days after Congolese and Rwandan leaders signed a so-called peace agreement in Washington. On Friday, the UN warned that this new development have reignited fears of a regional escalation.
To another topical story, 6 Palestinians were killed by Zionist fire in Gaza on Saturday in what Palestinian officials describe as a continued violation of the ceasefire agreement. Medical sources confirm 5 were killed when a vehicle was struck by 3 missiles west of Gaza City. Another Palestinian was killed by occupation fire in Jabalia area of northern Gaza. Zionist forces continue heavy airstrikes and the demolition of buildings across the entire strip.
We were informed by the operations crew that there was a strike in the Nablus area. We arrived at Nablus and recovered 3 injured individuals on our side. The Ministry of Health also recovered 1 injured person, and our colleagues from the Red Crescent recovered 3 martyrs. There's also another martyr. There are 4 martyrs and 6 injuries.
For his part, the director of Gaza's government media office, Ismail Thawabt, announced that last week's severe storm impacted over 250,000 displaced people in the Strip. In a statement on Saturday, he said at least 13 homes collapsed and more than 27,000 tents were swept away or flooded. Thawabt added that water lines were disrupted in dozens of shelters, with initial losses estimated at around $4 million. Meanwhile, the World Health Organization's representative for the occupied Palestinian territories says more than 1,000 patients in Gaza have died this year because they could not be evacuated for medical care outside the Strip. In a statement on Friday, Rick Peppercorn said 18 of Gaza's 36 hospitals, along with 43 primary healthcare centers, are only partially functional. He cited a severe shortage of essential medicines and supplies, noting that the process to bring such equipment into Gaza remains, in his words, very slow and complicated.
About 1,092 patients in the Gaza Strip died while waiting for medical evacuation between July 2024 and November 2025. This figure is likely lower than real number and does not fully reflect the reality, as it is based only on reported deaths. Only 18 out of 36 hospitals and 43% of primary healthcare centers in Gaza were partially operational. There is a severe shortage of essential medicines and medical supplies, including those needed to treat heart disease and other chronic illness. The process of allowing medicines and medical equipment into Gaza remains slow and necessarily complicated.
At least 13 people, including 3 children, were killed in Gaza by a winter storm between Wednesday and Friday. Heavy rains and strong winds destroyed homes and tents for displaced families, with some victims dying from hypothermia. Yes, Henrik has more now.
Amid relentless winter storms, the Gaza Strip is facing a worsening humanitarian disaster. Flooded displacement camps and freezing temperatures are putting hundreds of thousands of Palestinians at risk, on top of an already dire situation.
The weather conditions affecting Gaza are extremely severe. There have been reports of homes collapsing and the complete destruction of more than a dozen buildings. Dozens of other structures have partially collapsed, accounting for the 13 facilities we're mounting. More than 90% of tents sheltering Gaza's residents have been fully flooded, and in some areas, water levels have risen.
At least 13 people, including 3 children, have died after powerful winds and heavy rain tore through fragile tents and makeshift shelters. Families are being forced to flee again as their homes collapse or become uninhabitable with nowhere safe to go.
انهيار 13 منزلا على الأقل في محافظات قطاع غزة.
Regarding displaced people and their shelters, more than 53,000 tents have been partially or completely damaged or flooded. Tarpaulins, plastic sheeting and insulation materials have been destroyed, while mattresses, blankets and other bedding have been lost. Cooking utensils and essential supplies inside the tent have also been severely damaged.
Over 1.5 million displaced Palestinians are living in shelters that cannot withstand the extreme weather. Shortages of heating, winter supplies and basic protection are putting the most vulnerable at serious risk.
We were flooded. It was like a massive wave. I stayed in the tent all night with my daughter. It felt like a swimming pool, with water pouring from every direction. I swear I haven't slept a wink since Wednesday. We laid our mattresses out to dry, and now it's going to rain again. My entire kitchen is in ruins.
Gaza's already fragile infrastructure is breaking down under the strain. Flooding has overwhelmed sanitation systems, raising the threat of disease, while a crippled healthcare sector struggles to respond. Humanitarian agencies warn that without urgent help, the worsening winter could lead to even more suffering and loss of life.
The UN General Assembly passed a resolution demanding the Zionist occupation allow aid into Gaza, stop using starvation as a weapon, and end forced displacement. The vote saw 139 in favor and 12 against, led by the US. The resolution also called for unhindered UN operations and reaffirmed Ottawa as the sole authorized humanitarian provider in Gaza. In the same context, the United Nations reports occupation settlement expansion in the occupied West Bank has hit a record high this year. In a document to the Security Council, Secretary General Antonio Guterres stated that indicators of expansion have reached their highest level since UN monitoring began in 2017. He explained that tenders have been issued or approved for nearly 50,000 housing units compared to just over 26,000 last year. During a ceremony in Baghdad marking the end of the UN mission in Iraq, Secretary General Antonio Guterres stressed that respecting the ceasefire in Gaza is an essential step toward lasting peace. He affirmed that the Palestinian people require a credible political process to end the occupation. Elsewhere, thousands of students and professors protested in over 20 European cities Saturday, demanding Israel's expulsion from the European Union's flagship research horizon. In Nicosia, Cyprus, demonstrators gathered outside the European Commission building as part of a broader campaign to exclude Israel from the €95 billion program, which funds European research and innovation in fields like artificial intelligence and space. Moving on to another topical news story, fighting continues in Ukraine with casualties and heavy strikes, while the IAEA warns of nuclear risks in Zaporizhia. Zelensky seeks a dignified peace plan as Europe freezes €210 billion in Russian assets. Here's Salman Asib.
In Ukraine, the fighting shows no sign of slowing down, even as diplomats scramble to keep peace talks alive. Over the weekend, 2 people were killed in southern Russia after what officials say was Ukrainian shelling. Saratov's governor shared details for the casualties and the damage on Telegram. President Zelensky reported more than 450 drones and 30 missiles overnight, knocking out electricity, water across several regions. He's urging the international community to step up support for Ukraine's air defenses and long-range capabilities.
That they want to break us, yes, of course, as you can see. But we're not giving up. We came here, we didn't go anywhere. So we will wait and see where this leads. That they want to break us, yes, of course. As you can see, but we are not giving up. We came here, we didn't go anywhere. So we will wait and see where this leads. But we would like to stop the war, but not on the terms that are being proposed there.
Meanwhile, nuclear safety concerns are mounting. The IAEA said the Russian-held Zaporizhia plant lost all power briefly, marking the 12th outage since the war began. Director General Rafael Grossi stressed that keeping continuous power is critical to reactor safety. Diplomats are set to meet in Berlin as Zelensky prepares for European summit, pushing for what he calls a dignified peace with guarantees that Russia won't strike again.
Most importantly, I will have meetings with representatives of President Donald Trump, as well as meetings with our European partners and many leaders regarding the foundation of peace, a political agreement to end the war. Today, reports have been coming in all day from the regions, first and foremost from Odessa after Russian strikes. Recovery is ongoing. It is difficult, but all necessary forces are involved. I instructed government officials to accelerate repair processes as much as possible.
In the meantime, Europe froze €210 billion in Russian assets to raise the cost of the war. But some countries like Italy and Belgium warned the move could complicate talks, while Moscow has threatened legal action. Any handling of our sovereign assets without Russia's consent, whether by freezing them indefinitely, confiscating them, or attempting to portray their actual confiscation as a form of reparation loan, is absolutely illegal and constitutes a blatant violation of international law, regardless of the false legal tricks Brussels may resort to in order to justify this. Is it clear theft? Retaliatory measures will be taken soon. The Bank of Russia published a detailed statement on this matter December 12, and concrete steps are already being implemented. Across the Atlantic, President Trump pitched a U.S. plan to recreate a free economic zone in parts of eastern Ukraine under Kiev's control, a move aimed at reducing casualties and jumpstarting recovery, though many details remain unclear.
I don't want to do that now. It's a very complex situation, but it would work, and a lot of people want to see it work. And all I want to do is I want to stop the death of 25,000 people a month.
The situation remains tense on every front: military, nuclear, and diplomatic. Leaders say they are working toward a settlement, but the road to peace is far from straightforward.
In the same context, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan warned against turning the Black Sea into a confrontation zone between Russia and Ukraine. Speaking after a peace forum in Turkmenistan, he stressed the need for safe navigation and expressed hope to discuss the Russian-Ukrainian peace plan with the U.S., saying peace is within reach. In the U.S., President Donald Trump says ground operations targeting drug trafficking networks will begin soon. In a statement on Saturday, Trump said the U.S. has eliminated, in his words, 96% of drugs smuggled via sea routes. He said the focus will now shift to land, which he described as much easier.
We are knocking out drugs at levels that nobody's ever seen before. We knocked out 96% of the drugs coming in by water, and nobody can figure out who the 4%. I wouldn't want to be the 4% either, but 96% of the drugs coming in by water. Every one of those boats you see get shut down, you just saved 25,000 American lives. But we knocked out 96% of the drugs coming in by water, and now we're starting by land, and by land is a lot easier, and that's going to start happening. And we're not going to have people destroying our youth, destroying our families. Thinking about youth, everybody.
And finally, let's catch up on more news stories in the News in Brief, this time with Sofian Kanturi.
The UN support mission in Libya welcomed the start of voting in 9 municipalities on Saturday, calling on local authorities to ensure security and fully respect the will of Libyan people. The mission said the elections align with UN Security Council calls to resume the process and urged eligible voters to participate. Iranian authorities announced the seizure of a foreign oil tanker in Gulf of Oman, along with its 18 crew members, on charges of carrying 6 million liters of smuggled fuel. Officials said tanker ignored stop orders, attempted to flee, and lacked proper shipping documents, with investigations underway involving crew members from India, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. Thailand announced on Saturday that 4 of its soldiers were killed in renewed clashes along the border with Cambodia. A Thai Defense Ministry spokesperson said the deaths occurred during fighting in the Chongan Ma area, bringing the total number of Thai soldiers killed since the clashes began on Monday to 14. The death toll from recent floods and landslides in Indonesia has risen to 1,003. With more than 5,400 injured and 818 people still missing. The National Disaster Management Agency said over 3.3 million people have been affected, including nearly 1 million displaced to overcrowded temporary shelters, lacking basic services.
And that's the end of our news for tonight. To catch up on any part you missed or get the latest updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. On behalf of all 24 News team, I'm Karim Zachary. Thank you for watching and do take care.